Well, hello and welcome back to Read Becca. It's time once again for my weekly chatty catch-up on everything I've read, everything I'm currently reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading, as well as some general lifey chit-chat. Another good reading week, another all-over-the-place reading week. So let's dive in with, first, an unusual DNF. I DNF'd Marigold Mind Laundry by Jung-eun and translated by Shanna. And this one was rough for me because it was just so overcomplicated, and then I didn't feel like it kind of delivered in any way that wasn't cheap. So at the beginning, and I have found this to be maybe a commonality of Korean storytelling, the lead-in is so massively, ridiculously complicated. We're following a character who, her parents disappear and she falls into a void and is reincarnating without aging. I did not get an understanding of what was happening at all there. So I felt like, for me, skipping all of that and just simply starting with, she's some sort of special entity that's running a laundry shop that is also somewhat special. Like that was all I needed instead of this big preamble. So needless to say, that's what the real premise is of the book. And as is typical with these kind of books, it seemed to, in the 5 chapters I think that I read, set off with sort of vignettes where we have a character showing up to somewhere near the mind laundry, and it is a laundromat, but it also has this element where they're coming in with baggage and something they want to forget. And this woman who is running the mind laundry takes a clothing item, washes it, and they leave feeling, I don't know, freed of it. They haven't forgotten what it was that happened to them, but they feel free of it and it's not a burden to them anymore. But there's no process there. There's nothing. It's just sort of, I washed this shirt for you and now you're happy. And that didn't land for me. It was just like, what is the point of this? I don't feel like I'm getting anything out of it. We hear some sort of difficult stories, though they didn't connect with me emotionally, I think, because of the way that this was formatted. So, for instance, there was a big story about this famous influencer who did something kind of unethical in a brand that they were selling and creating. And we see that aspect of them having made this a sort of unethical choice, but then we also see the hardships and the burdens that were on them that led to them doing that, but without really much nuance. And it didn't make me empathetic for them. They still shouldn't have done this horrible thing. There was a huge amount of pressure on them from their family. They basically were supporting their family and being taken advantage of and having to work very hard just to keep up with the Joneses kind of deal. But still, they were a cheesy influencer who had no reason to do this. There was no reason for them to start along this path in the first place, and I just didn't buy into it. So I wanted the empathy to be there, and it didn't land. So big DNF. There are many others to come because I have a long line of cozy shop books yet to read. So the next thing was much more successful and is kind of an odd situation, and that is Rose House by Arkady Martine. This is kind of weird in the content of the book, but also in the book, because this was actually a specialty publication from a small press originally, Subterranean Press. They published an e-version, so ebook version only, and then in print they had a limited number of signed and numbered copies. And that was shortly after the massive popularity of Arkady Martine's previous duology, the sci-fi space opera duology, the TX Empire, which I loved, and it was a big award winner. And so this was right on the heels of that a couple years ago. But that meant it was very limited in availability. So this has just been reprinted. Tor Novellas have just picked up the rights for publishing this in 2025. So this came out now for wide availability currently. And I also listened to the audio, which is on Hoopla right now. So I hybrid read it, and that worked well, though I don't know if I love the tone choice, but I think it worked. Regardless, this is an odd one because it is a shorty for Shorty September. It's only about 100 pages, and it feels effective to me. It feels like it establishes a whole world that is a near future where we have this literal place, a rose house out in the desert, from sort of an incredibly enigmatic character who was an architect that designed buildings with AIs built into them. So Rose House is his home. And the AI of the house, which is abandoned basically, has called up the police locally in this small remote area to their tip line to tell them, because it's required to report, that there's been a death in the house. And no one's supposed to be there, and the house doesn't let anyone in. And so that on its own is very unusual. And so we're following Maritza, the police officer who is investigating this death. And she can't get into the house. Like, that's kind of the onset of this. She sort of goes to the house and is like, I can't get in. So there's only one person, the architect's apprentice, who is not local, not living in the house, is the only person who has access to the house. And so she has to call up this person and wait for them to let her into the house. So most of this story is them just going into the house. And as I said, it's only 100 pages. We also do, and this is not like a spoiler or a twist or anything whatsoever, but the police officer, Maritza, her partner, becomes part of the story at some point. He's not initially, and then does. And so we do also get his perspective once he has kind of entered the story. So we get a couple of perspectives. We as well are getting some brief snippets of Celine, the architect's apprentice, as she is coming here and going into the house. We don't ever get like an AI perspective, but the AI is certainly ever present. And we're seeing people find out more and more about this past architect, the AI, what his designs were, both present and in past. And I love that Martine she's a city planner, or she's had a lot of jobs. She's done a lot of really cool things. And she was one of the speakers in the science sparkle salons that I have in the past recommended that are here on YouTube. If you have any interest, let me know and I'll share where they are. But they were discussions between these people who were professionals in careers other than sci-fi, in very expert careers. And so she has done city planning. She is a historian, I think, or teaches history in the Byzantine Empire. Just very cool. So I'm really rambling now. But so this was not tidy in giving closure to the reader, I think. So if a mystery, if going into a mystery, you need to have like a very tight ending, this doesn't have that. But I love this because it is sort of one of those books that has a lot of open threads that kind of burrow into your brain. And it was very satisfying to read from a vibe perspective as well, because it is kind of a murder mystery, but not quite. It feels very, very much like both a Gothic house story and also like a noirish crime novel. And I can't point to any single element that actually delivers on that specifically, but it just is the vibe and feeling. Much more, this is sort of sci-fi suspense, I would say. It's not horror or proper murder mystery, so it doesn't fit in those, but certainly could overlap into those categories. It's just very eerie, ominous, and there's a sense of dread looming through the whole thing. And I very much like that. There's nothing like graphic, really, nothing gruesome at all in here. So if you're nervous about that, I am a little disappointed, honestly, because this fell very flat when it came out. I think people generally, from what I heard, were a little disappointed in it, coming off of the epic sci-fi that Martine had previously written. And this is something very different, and so I could see why people that were looking for more of the same would have bounced off of this. But I felt like this was super innovative and really is going to stick in my mind a little bit. So I'm very glad to have finally gotten a chance to read this. And then we have two very fluffy books, very soft, fluffy books. The first is Once Upon You and Me by Timothy Janovsky. And this is a Harlequin romance. It looks a little unusual for a category. And I would say the feeling of it is a little unusual as well. It didn't feel as formulaic. But we love to see a man writing male-male romance for a category publisher, because that's kind of unusual. So I'm happy to have picked it up and really enjoyed it. I had such a great time with this. So we are following an age gap romance a bit, though the cover kind of bothers me that Taylor here looks way too young on the cover. He is not that young. So we're following Ethan, the bear, here, who is kind of burly and plaid wearing, and Taylor, who is in his late 20s, in fact, and Ethan, I think, is 40. So Ethan and Taylor are both involved in working for a storybook-themed resort in rural northern New York. And so the setting was really very present, and I enjoyed that a lot. But this resort, Ethan ran with his ex-wife. And she is now trying to expand it into an empire of multiple locations. There is a second location in California, I think, that Taylor is primarily involved in helping with that expansion because he is, in fact, the ex-wife's personal assistant. And somehow, despite it being a couple of years that he's been working for her, the two have never actually met in person, though they've corresponded a lot. And both have kind of their hackles up about each other. Ethan and Taylor do, because they have preconceptions about one another, really. And so when they meet, finally, in the lead up to Ethan's daughter's Sweet 16 that's going to be held at the resort, Taylor is coming there to help set everything up and do a lot of the party planning stuff. And Ethan gave up rights to the resort, but still manages the original location more or less as part of the divorce. So he has taken a step back from running the business and is just settled into managing the resort with his dog, Nana, who is very wonderful. And obviously, as it's a storybook resort, she was named for Peter Pan. So, and is the same type of dog. So he has a very sort of laid back, casual life, though he's constantly problem solving. And Taylor very often runs into problems, it seems, but is also a problem solver. And the two of them slowly break down the walls that they've put up about each other. And I loved watching that. Like, it's not a true enemies to lovers, but it was just a really nice, them growing into each other sort of deal. And rapidly in the lead up, the days working toward the Sweet 16 party, they're getting closer and closer because of a series of events, of course, disasters that have pushed them together. And that feels like it would be more tropeful than it actually felt in the delivery here. So I felt like there was a lot there in terms of predictability that was delivered in a fresh way. It just charmed me so much how their interactions were very loving right from the start. This is spicy and open door. It gets explicit, but without being like erotica. It didn't ever feel like that to me. But yet they feel like they were connecting on a deeper level. So it wasn't just that, and it was not in any way a litany of sort of sex scenes. But they felt like they should be together, and I just love that. I also feel like there was a great depiction here of ADHD, with Ethan dealing with that, and it being a struggle, but something he's sort of learned to manage, and that just being part of his day-to-day, and Taylor also recognizing and understanding that. It was very nice. One of the things that didn't work as much for me was that when the ex-wife finds out that they are having a romantic relationship, she reacts in a very controlling way and very, very negative. And you can see that coming from a mile away. But no one sort of responds by kind of saying, yeah, we're consenting adults, like we can do what we want. Like, it's in no way involving their work. They don't have sort of a power imbalance between their roles. Like, it just, that didn't really ring true to me, though it could, given their characterization, very possible. I don't know. I just didn't really like it or enjoy how that played out. But I did enjoy very much the setting. The love story between the two felt very genuine. And you don't often get that from a category romance. Like a category romance can feel good and happy and fluffy, but often feels somewhat within a pre-built framework. And this didn't have this. It felt really like a true romance, and I enjoyed it so much for that. So the other one that I read that was a romance is Anywhere You Go by Bridget Morrisey. And this one was great. Also very much enjoyed. And this one is a sapphic romance, so it fit for Sapphic September. This is also from Penguin Random House, so it's very low on spice. I would say it's open door, but not really described type of sex scenes. So some sexy times are happening, but nothing in graphic detail. And this is going to seem like it has an overcomplicated setup, but it really, really worked for me. So I'm going to take way too long describing this one, I'm sure. So our two ladies on the front in the middle are not the couple. This is a home swap type of story. So they are swapping houses. And I loved that setup. It was so fun. And this felt like it could be like a rom-com movie really, really easily. It would be great. So we were following Eleanor and Tatum. And there's no infidelity necessarily in the actual story, but that's kind of the catalyst, I guess. So Tatum lives in the mother-in-law cottage of her parents' house. And it recognizes living with him that there is some significant tension there between them. And she feels like she's constantly having to be the peacemaker. And a lot of that goes back to her father seems to be like the sweetest guy, yet he had some infidelity years and years past. And now it has come to light recently that there was a child born out of that infidelity. And that son is an adult. They're wanting to have a family reunion and introduce him to the whole family. So Tatum is not really ready for that at all. She also, at the same time, is in a situation where she works at a diner and ghost writes things on the side for free on the internet, primarily breakup texts. She has a website where people submit requests anonymously for her to do breakup texts. You would think that was going to be a major element of the story. It's really not. But it's part of the catalyst. So June is a woman who comes into her diner who makes perfumes, and June is her crush. So June is also dating someone. And guess what? That someone contacts Tatum for a breakup message. And only do Tatum and June find out after the fact, after June is showing her. So June is heartbroken. Tatum doesn't know what to do because she's absolutely got a massive crush on June, but turned her down in the past because she sabotages her romantic self. And June had planned with her ex a trip to New York. Now she has no one to go with. She is not an independent person at all, but she has to go because it's to expand her perfume business to something that she could never achieve on her own. And so, of course, Tatum is like, just as friends, really, let's go to New York. So they agree to do that. Well, at the same time, our other character, Eleanor, lives in New York. So Tatum's in Chicago. So this is Chicago to New York. Eleanor lives in a nice apartment in New York. It works in PR and has been seeing a guy for a while that is one of her clients, who is a Broadway actor, I believe. And she only finds out when his fiance posts that they got engaged on social media that he was actually in a long-term relationship. So she immediately contacts the fiance to tell her what was happening and that she's the other woman. And it torpedoes her whole life, basically. So she no longer has this relationship that she thought was starting up. She loses her job because she was obviously in a relationship with a client. And she now has nothing. She's feeling chaos. But she has 2 cats at her apartment, so she's desperately seeking someone to watch her cats for her while she just takes off and runs away. And so that very lengthy setup is the start of the book. And it really does play out very naturally and doesn't seem that complicated as it's being told. So we end up with them swapping places. Almost immediately, Eleanor gets there and is charmed by this sort of, it's very like suburban family living type of area, it seems like. And she loves the little cottage house. She meets Tatum's sibling, Carson, and sparks immediately fly. It's very obvious. They just immediately connect and have this great relationship. And then we also, in the New York side of things, see June and Tatum going back and forth on the romantic feelings. Like, they're clearly there, but they're both so resistant to it because of the situation that they're in and not wanting to be a rebound, and the other constantly torpedoing their relationship. But they meet a neighbor who happens to be an aging former star who really helps them out and is just this wonderful presence in their whole story. And so, yeah, I loved her the most, I think. There are 2 cats because they're cat sitting. But I felt like there's a blurb on here that mentions how much you will love the cats. Like, they're cats, they're present, but they weren't really given a personality or anything, and they're not a major part of the story. So I wished there had been more cats. I also felt like this was too long. So that was the main downfall of this. I really liked it, other than that it just dragged. I got to the point where it felt like things were starting to wrap up, and there was still 100 pages to go. I was like, what even could happen in this 100 pages? And in fact, most of that is time jumps. Not like sci-fi time jumps. But normally with a romance novel, you tend to get an epilogue where you jump forward a few months or a year and you get to see them being happy and whatnot. This we got multiple things like that to where it was like a month later, 2 months later, 3 months later. And I was like, why is this happening? I did not need that. I wish it had just sort of wrapped up and then maybe given us one cohesive epilogue, jumping forward, whatever the farthest time out was, and just encapsulating, okay, here's the happy conclusion for both of them. But I did so enjoy it. I really enjoyed the story. And as I said, it felt very like cinematic and like this could be a great rom-com movie because it has that fun storytelling of the home swap. It has a lot of drama in the relationships built in without feeling like it's just pure drama. It's conflict that didn't feel harsh, if that makes any sense. It felt very soft and like they could get through things. So, and of course, the aging starlet was the best character. So I very much enjoyed this, and it was a great selection for Sapphic September. And that is it for what I finished this week, now that I've talked way too long. In reading, I am working on Conan the Victorious, a very small bit into that. I'm working on 2 of my BookTube prize books, and yet another Cozy Shop book has in fact come in audio, so I will be getting to that sometime soon. So that's it for books. I did not actually finish any watching stuff. All of my favorite things are have currently just started up. So I have many ongoing things that I'm watching right now, week to week, and not a lot of finishes currently. I think in life, it was also a very low-key week. I'm looking forward very much to this very, very hot week being over, and we're heading into normal summer temperatures with hopefully rain every day for the next week. I'm really, really crossing my fingers that it's not one of those situations where it just never actually rains. It's predicted and then it never actually rains. It's supposed to sometime this afternoon start and then continue on, but it has not started yet. It's not raining out there. I keep looking and it's not going. So hopefully that will happen. Otherwise, I got my flu shot this week, which is good. I don't want to get sick while I have any up in the air stuff with health insurance for sure. Since those are now out and available, I let Mr. Lynxy, my foster cat, go back to the shelter this week. So I will make sure to post a clip of his highlight reel at the end of the video so you can see Mr. Lynx. He is so darling. I hope very much that he gets picked up quickly. I think he's gonna have a real hard time at the shelter. But he is a real sweetheart, and I'm sad to see him go, but I'm also glad that he's getting his chance and will hopefully have a happily ever after of his own this week. So with that, I think we're down to recommendations, and I have one recommendation for you this week for Elle Thinks. Elle was running through recapping some works read on a project topic to focus on some international reading, specifically highlighting these African works, and really dived into some works that I would never have heard of elsewhere probably. Very specifically was an intent of the project to dig into kind of indie and unknown works. And so that was so wonderful to see. That's always something that I love, hearing about books that I wouldn't have heard about otherwise. So fantastic stuff. And I think that's it. So with that, I will wish you a great week in reading and in life. And thank you so very much for watching.